Welcome to Indefinable Magic. Nostalgic witterings to facilitate whimsy, distraction, and perhaps just a little bit of identification between strangers united by a TV programme about a misfit thwarting the bullies. Written and performed by me, Toby Haydock. This week, it's back, and it's about time. Do you want to come with me? I still call it New Who, and it's 20 years old this week as I record this. Gosh, and I remember the show's first 20th anniversary in 1983, and what a time to be alive that was. But anyway, I was 31 when Doctor Who came back. A lot of water under the bridge since then, and that water has swept a lot of things along with it. Smoking in pubs, MySpace, common courtesy on public transport. But before we get to all of that, let's go back to the source, 20 years ago this week, as I record this, Rose made its debut on BBC One. The impossible happened. Doctor Who was back. Now, I'm a child of the cancellation. Ever since Michael Gray did a Ratner and sullied the public's perception of a potential televisual crown jewel and so compromised its sparkle, I've lived with the fear that Doctor Who would be taken away, which it was in 1989, and that it would never come back, which it didn't, apart from the heady madness that surrounded the Paul McGann TV movie, which seemed to succeed and fail at the same time, but definitely didn't lead to an ongoing series on BBC One, which, despite all the goodies on offer from Big Finish and the show's TV back catalogue, was what I really wanted. Not a day went by that I didn't think about Doctor Who in the wilderness years. My whole life infected by the fact that the one thing I really wanted, and was it too much to ask for a popular and successful cultural landmark to actually be made every once in a while, wasn't happening. And I spent my time disbelieving the latest press speculation that, Timmy Mallet would be playing the Doctor, or worse still, a woman would be. Imagine that. Never happened. But I was largely cross about things because every day was bathed in the shadow of injustice that not only was Doctor Who not on, but public discourse about it tended to be of the, yeah, I remember that tatty old thing. It was rubbish, wasn't it? Variety. Imagine being a football fan and the public perception of World Cup 1966 was that Geoff Hurst fell over, and we probably lost. But even though the show itself wasn't on, there were glimmers of hope and things to consume. A death comes to time here, a scream of the Schalke there, the latter downloaded in, 3-second chunks down a chugging phone line connected to a chunky 3-piece computer. Oh, Hewlett-Packard, you were my rock. Still, it meant that it took approximately 4 hours to watch a 15-minute episode. Talk about timey-wimey. Not that I'd have used that phrase then. I'd have sounded like an idiot. But anyway, after various rumours, conjectures, fantasies and false dawns, suddenly it was back. In fact, funny enough, I don't actually remember where I was when it was confirmed that the programme was returning. Over a year early, late in 2003. Perhaps there'd been too many false dawns, so I wasn't going to etch it into my head until I was sitting in front of it and the doubly dums turned into ooey-oos. But I do know that even before that, when one had entertained the fantasy that it might return, excitement was filled with worry. Would there be doubly dums or even ooey-oos? What if they decided to reboot it? I don't think we used that word then, either. I think we just said something like, ride roughshod over all established continuity and just ruin the whole bloody thing, wah! Or something equally reasonable. What if it was too American? Would there be cliffhangers? Probably not. I think I resigned myself early on to the fact that if it was going to come back, it would be in the Buffy, Casualty, Most Telly format of single-episode stories. I wasn't wild about that, but I think it was a sacrifice I was prepared to make. I'm not one of those fans, I thought. Anyway, once that announcement was made, and I recall pretty quickly confirmed and accepted, there came a constant flow of information about what we were to expect, which brought with it, of course, surprise, delight, and, well, disappointment. There's always disappointment. Never mind death being a constant companion, it's disappointment that's the real killer. Disappointment now certainly wasn't on the cards when the actor playing the Doctor was announced, even though he wasn't someone I'd have guessed in a million years, and I do remember where I was when I found out that Christopher Eccleston was the new Doctor. I'm not sure who I expected. I think we sensed somebody like Anthony Head might be on the cards, someone like Richard E. Grant, if only he hadn't done it already. But I remember suggesting to a friend that someone like Roger Lloyd-Pack might be interesting. Oh yes, I was very much in the realm of oddball middle-aged character actor when I was thinking about who they'd pick. My finger, as usual, on the pulse. But on the pulse of someone who hasn't done any exercise for about 30 years. I had to wait a while for Lloyd-Pack to turn up in the show, and I think it's fair to say that when he did, it was a somewhat odd experience. But look, I'm not going to cast aspersions on a venerable and much-missed actor from beyond the grave, so let's say that when I thought back to my suggestion that he should have played the Doctor, well, let's just say I was somewhat triggered. But Eccleston definitely did come out of left field, and yet his casting was such a relief in many ways, because the newspapers, you see, had got into the habit of suggesting various light-ent stars, like the aforementioned Timmy Mallet or Paul Daniels or Lionel Blair, when the Wilderness Years seemed determined to characterise Doctor Who as a show that it resolutely wasn't, and in fact had never been. I bet Juliet Bravo fans never got that. Who do you think they should cast next if they bring the show back? Samantha Fox? Isla St. Clair? Some young pop star? Anyway, but Eccleston. Shakespearean actor, the papers called him, which wasn't my view. Edgy, intense actor in modern dramas. Yeah, that was much more his bag in those days. And his final scene in Cracker was, and still is, a breathtaking favourite TV moment of all time for me. But he'd played Iago in a modernised TV Othello and done Hamlet on stage, so hey-ho. And many newspaper types seem to have only heard of either Shakespeare or Coronation Street in those days, so any thespian was either a Shakespearean or a Coronation Street actor, or both, depending on your paper, and Eccleston hadn't walked the Weatherfield cobbles, so Shakespearean it was. Still, not long after, pretty much every member of the UK acting profession became Harry Potter actor, even if they were a Knight of the Realm, or only crossed wands with the wizard for a matter of moments. Lazy journalism means that no matter what's on an actor's CV, if he wants a proper biography, a tabloid is never likely to let him have it. But anyway, Christopher Eccleston's casting meant business, and it also meant I wasn't sure I could imagine how this Doctor would be. Had they gone the traditional route, providing many of us with what we wanted, a happy ending by giving us Head, or Richard E. Grant, or Bill Nye, or David Warner, well, I think I'd have had an idea of the Doctor they were going to give us before I'd even seen a single second. But with Eccleston, there was a lot of uncertainty, and unusually, I found this state of affairs rather exciting, intriguing. It struck me that until I'd seen the trailer, I wasn't even sure he'd be doing it in a northern accent. I didn't know, of course, at that point, that lots of planets have a north. Now, even though I'm a Manchester dweller, it seemed vital to me that Doctor Who remain resolutely in the realms of RP. Until, of course, he stared out of the telly and said, "Do you want to come with me?" And I thought, too bloody right I do, pal. And it was a subtle indicator that times were changing. And despite my ingrained preference for people talking proper, it is undoubtedly, in a wider context, a change for the better, our TV hero having an accent which doesn't put off those to whom everyone sounding posh might be a barrier. Fast forward to a few years later, mid-Wimbledon, and I found the revelation of a female Doctor similarly unearth-shattering. That's what they should have called her first episode, An Unearthly Shattering, or An Unearthly Glass Ceiling Shattering. But anyway, that hasn't happened yet. Shush. Now, with Eccleston, he was the new Doctor. But I remember explaining to a friend of my partner's that he was going to be the new star of the show, and she had no idea who he was. I explained again. Still, no. See, I sometimes think that those of us who know who actors are, well, we're in something of a minority, and that most people, the denizens of Islington and Shepherd's Bush, think of as big names, are a complete mystery to 98% of the population. Unless they've seen them in either Shakespeare or Coronation Street, of course. Someone I think we had both heard of, however, was Billy Piper. Oh my goodness, this is bringing it all flooding back, because with all the excitement that Doctor Who was returning, and that Russell T Davies, who had made the popular and successful Queer as Folk and The Second Coming and Bob and Rose, was the man behind it, I still lived in the aforementioned shadow of cancellation and ridicule, and was eagle-eyed for any sign that this new version of my programme would be a disaster. But I didn't have to look too far, for on May the 24th, 2004, an announcement was made. May 2004. Tony Blair was Prime Minister, Manchester United had just won the FA Cup, and at number 1 in the UK charts was F You Right Back by Frankie, that rare thing, the pop song as sequel. Its predecessor at number 1 was F It, I Don't Want You Back by Eamon, and to be perfectly honest, I'd be happy to have neither Frankie nor Eamon and their potty mouths back ever again. They can F off the pair of them. Even now, I'm much happier about a Northern Doctor than I am about swearing in pop songs. But I digress, if only slightly, for pop music was at the heart of my fury on that fateful May day, where to me there suddenly ceased to be any magic in the world after all. Forget Paul Daniels and Lionel Blair. I'd been so worried about them it hadn't occurred to me that the role of the companion might go to a bloomin' pop star. I was expecting some complete unknown, or maybe someone who'd been in some cool teen drama. That'd be fine. Bring in the kids while the Shakespearean actor does all the heavy lifting. But Billy Piper? Since 2003, I'd managed to get that chip off my shoulder mostly, but now it felt like I'd got a whole plate of them on it, and someone had decided to piss on the whole damn lot of them. I was genuinely incandescent. I remember exactly where I was when I called my friend and yelled down the phone, a Nokia which had Snake on it and cost 12p to send a text message from. In fury! Billy effing Piper, I yelled. My new neighbour, I suspect, somewhat bemused, and probably they weren't impressed that I was swearing like that lady in that pop song at number 1 was doing. People today. Oh yes, because new neighbours. We'd just moved. Life had continued. The interminable wait between the announcement and the broadcast of the first episode was enlivened not only by hints and snippets in the media, but by the fact that I was now a grown-up, which I wasn't when Doctor Who had been rent from our televisions back in 1989, when I was a schoolboy. Things happen when you're a grown-up that make time move ever quicker, so even as I ached for the show to return, life changed apace. At the announcement, I was living in my first house in Salford, but when I told my partner's friend about the Eccleston she'd never heard of, I was staying temporarily at my friend's Mark house while we waited to move into Haydock Property No. 2 in Chorlton, South Manchester. And when Rose was finally broadcast, that is where I was. But we'd done quite a lot of work on it to make it a home, yet a home it was come TARDIS time. Oh, crikey. Another child had arrived in the meantime too. Life was busier and more complicated and eventful than when I'd been a kid waiting for the show to come back, but, well, so in some ways it was better because it meant that the time went quicker. Be careful what you wish for, though. 51-year-old Toby rather wishes it would slow down, that Tempus could do its fugiting at a somewhat slower pace, please. Anyway, somewhere back in time. Billy effing Piper, I yelled. This was a sign that the modern world wasn't really equipped for the brilliant, serious show that I loved. Oh yes, that was the shadow I dwelt in. Doctor Who had gone from being a national treasure in its 20th anniversary, when my fandom was consolidated with the publications of the Radio Times 20th anniversary special and Doctor Who A Celebration, treasure troves of the show's rich history, to being a laughingstock. I lived with that injustice, and every time there was a clip show or a snide comment from Noel Edmonds, or Martin Clunes' snake dance costume was laughed at on Parkinson, or I went to see a play and an actor who'd been in Doctor Who didn't include it in his programme biog. Oh, they'd mention Shakespeare or Coronation Street, though, of course they would. The more the thing I loved became the source of my resentment, but the besmirchment of Doctor Who in the public eye matched the besmirchment on my face. I was riddled with the skin condition psoriasis, which is in part exacerbated by her emotional state, and my core of disenchantment with life in general, with my physical appearance, with the state of Doctor Who, meant that I was a tumult of rancour and canker, and as a result, if I'm honest, probably a bit of an angry wanker. Oh, I was definitely an angrier person then. I think I thought that anger had currency. Railing against the world seemed to give me a purpose. I was looking in the wrong place. I was young, I was gigging all the time, and I had 2 kids whom I could have enjoyed more were I not constantly hungover. So I should have been happier and cheerier and enjoyed life for what it was. But I was an accumulation of resentments, not to mention physical pain and mental shame from the ague that blighted my skin, that blinded me to all the wonderful things that were happening. Doctor Who's coming back, yeah, but I bet the public will probably hate it. Doctor Who's coming back, yeah, but I bet something will be wrong with it. Doctor Who's coming back, yeah, but with Billy bloody Piper. Billy Piper, whom, incidentally, I couldn't have picked out of a crowd and knew nothing about, apart from the fact that she was a pop star. But who needs facts when you're anticipating the apocalypse? But still, that primal excitement couldn't be abated. Doctor Who magazine had done so brilliantly when the show wasn't being made, managing to give me my monthly fix and help to keep me addicted. But now? Well, I started to get the bus into town 2 days ahead of the official publication date, on the off chance that it was out early, as it sometimes was, but usually wasn't. Worth the trip, though, just in case. And I remember once heading to Forbidden Planet as a lumberjack-shirted colossus exited and went past me. It was only Russell T. Bloody Davis who, as it happened, didn't live far from me at all. I didn't say anything, of course, and I'll level with you for why. I hadn't showered or put on any decent clothes. I was only going to Forbidden Planet, for God's sake. I didn't need to be in my glad rags. And my own thoughts told me, as I sauntered past, that I didn't look like an actor, because that's what I am. I'm an actor. I didn't want anybody, especially Russell T. Davis, thinking of me as a scruffy Doctor Who fan. Who wants to be known as one of those? So I let him pass, lucky chap, and immediately regretted it. I might never meet him, and I blew my chance. I didn't have to go far to hear from him, though, as he was always on hand to build up the excitement, tantalising us with his monthly column and giving exciting quotes to Gallifrey Guardian. Thinking back, the process of hoovering up every morsel of information so tantalisingly dropped by RTD, was as thrilling as watching the episodes themselves. Indeed, that period contained these 3 words: anticipation, longing, excitement. If he gives up writing, he could easily be a great salesman, could Russell T. Davis. In fact, I remember once Terence Dix saying he wouldn't trust John Nathan Turner to sell whelks. Well, I'd trust RTD to sell whelks to the owners of the European Whelk Mountain. It seemed not a month went by when the good people of Cardiff raising the bar in some way or another. That bar is in fact so high up now it is not visible from Earth using the naked eye. Even I could limbo under the Bad Wolf Bar, and I'm a portly old sod with limited flexibility. It wasn't just the magazine and all its talk of bar raising, though, although I remember devouring that first interview with Christopher Eccleston, which felt like the beginning of something truly exciting. Doctor Who was everywhere. Hey, I remember flicking on teletext one day. Sidebar, young people. Teletext was a thing on your telly that was like the internet designed by someone who hates you. Like a book that turned its own pages whenever it damn well liked, and then occasionally ripped one out just as you were about to read it. And the top entertainment story on teletext that day revealed that Simon Callow was to be playing Charles Dickens in the new series of Doctor Who. Now, my God, that did seem like big news. Callow was a Dickens exemplar and also a huge name. Someone, in fact, I'd tipped to be the Doctor at one point. A middle-aged white guy, Toby. I'm sensing a pattern here, and not one that reflects very well on you. Zoe Wanamaker was announced too in a story called The End of the World. Now, I imagine some dystopian, windswept terrain with people dressed like they were in Dune or something. You know, something serious and proper, and definitely not with a Britney Spears song, Tainted Love by Soft Cell, and a condescending flap of skin baddie. Ha ha! Oh, I much prefer what we got to what I thought I'd prefer we got. Oh, but I mentioned teletext and more floods back. R.I.P. teletext. That wasn't the only thing I might mention herein that may as well be rendered in Swahili semaphore from someone invisible in a box to anyone born this century. In fact, I recorded the build-up to the new series, and indeed the series itself, on a thing called VHS. Oh, I had a DVD player, bought for the exclusive use of the Robots of Death when that came out in this brand new and surely never to become redundant disc format, which was surely the last word in Doctor Who collecting. But recordable DVD machines were state-of-the-art, and I don't know much about art, but the state of my finances precluded me from owning one. So, when Rose came on TV, I did what I'd done with episode 3 of Survival back in 1989. I fired up my video machine and made my own printed covers for the chunky boxes my priceless recordings were to be stored in. And nothing is wasted. Those skills I'd honed as a youngster, learning when to anticipate trailers or clips or features in magazine programmes so I could record them whilst minimising the extraneous fluff before and after them, were suddenly in play again. I felt like how it must be to be an expert cobbler now, a purveyor of a near extinct lost art. But social media was just around the corner, even if it is odd now imagining a world without it. Before it, I didn't join Facebook until just over a year after Rose, and I was unknown to Twitter until 2009. I have people I consider amongst my closest friends now who I didn't even know when Rose aired. I honestly really only had 2 or 3 mates who were Doctor Who fans. And I'd never really been that actively involved in fandom, nor, frankly, had I any inclination so to be. And now look at me. Almost everyone I know is a Doctor Who fan. I caught that electrifying "Do You Want to Come With Me" trailer a number of times, whilst Eccleston's appearance on Jonathan Ross featured a plethora of clips that made the whole thing look amazing. I devoured that hearteningly sturdy package again and again before the episode went out, scrutinising every frame. I'd already decided the empty child looked just incredible. No life signs of any kind. They just don't die. Then there was the Doctor Who mastermind. Was it me, or was Eccleston being a bit cagey and distant? No. That was just me being paranoid. Get out of the shadows of the cancellation, Toby. Live a bit. It's all fine. Not everything comes with a price. Oh, and the clip on, I think it was Blue Peter, or maybe it was Granada Reports, or maybe it was both, of him doing the Feeling the Earth spin speech. And then Late Review covered it. Ooh. I was a regular viewer of that programme in which clever, artsy people picked over the week's cultural offerings. I used to fancy myself moving in such circles, being all smart and cultural and interesting. 20 years later, I can't imagine anything more ghastly, and the idea that Bonnie Greer might not get the show bothers me not a jot. I'd rather hang around with like-minded people at the BFI after a showing of the animated version of the latest missing episode recreation. And, frankly, I'm much more interested in what my mum thinks of Doctor Who than somebody from Late Review or one of its successors. For the record, Greer found Rose to be cheap and wondered who it was for. Paul Morley, on the other hand, was much more engaged and excited by it. But hey, look, it was getting serious coverage and consideration. I was even shocked by a news vox pop in which some accosted young women were asked about the show and had never even heard of it. This, of course, made me immediately panic and worry that no one at all was going to watch it. We're doomed! Or were we? Oh, I don't know. Doctor Who was everywhere. Even where I live now, in Chorlton, there was a big advertising hoarding at the end of a row of houses on the main road, opposite the bus stop. It always had on it the big show, film, or product du jour. Well, in the du jour that was February 2006, the biggie was, well, silly old Doctor Who. For staring out from that hoarding that I passed every day were Eccleston and Piper, bathed in that holy light of the TARDIS behind them. Wow, dare I dream? And then the bus pulled up, and they were on that too. You didn't get this in 1989. So there was an infectious excitement, and it did seem that people outside of my circle were aware of the show. So I began to become cautiously optimistic about what the viewing figures for the first episode might be. People would tune in out of curiosity, I thought, and because there genuinely seemed to be a publicity drive that extended beyond the hardcore nerds like me. So yeah, people might watch. But what if the show wasn't actually that good? Then nobody would watch the following week, and Doctor Who would be over forever. Ruined. Or even worse, what if it was good? I mean, it looks amazing after all, but the bloody British public don't realise and have no taste and don't watch precisely because it's good, and they like rubbish thanks to, I know, Murdoch and Thatcher and The Word. Or even worse, that people would watch and the critics would rave, but the BBC wouldn't take any notice and would axe it anyway just to spite me. So whatever happened, I felt, good, bad or indifferent, it would likely end in disaster. All roads lead to cancellation when you're a child of the hiatus, even if your favourite show should be the equivalent of a listed building. Grade M, anyone? Fast forward to now, and the current uncertainty about the show's future, if only in the world of gossip, like you. I only know what I read in the papers and online. But it doubtless has some hardcore fans at last able to yell, "See, I told you it wouldn't last!" Delighted that they might finally be able to enunciate their perspicacity for disaster, which they've been anticipating since September 2003. So, do you want to come with me? Come to March 2006, Chorlton, Manchester, the North, where the Doctor Who's come from now. My family were away. It's fair to say we weren't in the best place, so when my partner phoned 2 minutes before the episode was due to air, part of me considered that she'd done that on purpose, forcing me to demur and put off chatting to the kids until later because of some TV show. But that's a bit unfair of me, isn't it? She wouldn't be that mean. That said, the other option is that she'd no idea the show was about to start, which also wasn't the best indication that she'd been paying the remotest attention to anything that had been dominating my life over the previous 18 months at all. Either way, my feelings of imminent disaster about the state of my union weren't unwarranted. But that's another story. That said, she did, to be fair, watch it when she came back from that weekend break. In fact, she even watched that documentary, Doctor Who, A New Dimension. I remember this, not because I recall her reaction to it, but rather I remember me showing off. Oh yeah, I suddenly had swagger. This was a show on everyone's lips now, and for a change, the language everyone was talking was one I was fluent in. Without even thinking about it, when David Tennant's name popped up in the credits as the narrator of that preview documentary that I had clearly made her watch a repeat or a recording of, "That's the 10th Doctor," I said cockily, with no idea that it would turn out to be true. I just knew that David Tennant was a fan and an actor enjoying some success with a Russell T Davies project, and I was feeling confident enough that the show was going to prosper and that one day they'd be searching for a replacement for Eccleston. Little did I know that that one day had already passed. Seems crazy now in retrospect, though, that the next star of the series had actually narrated the documentary that heralded its return. It's almost like casting the master using the guy that has already done it in an online cartoon. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. March the 26th, 2006. I had the day to myself, warming up for D-Day, Doctor Who Day, that is, by getting in some champagne and crisps and stuff in order to make this a truly indulgent experience. That morning, I surveyed my massive shelf of VHSs and chose, for what I suspected would be the very last time in a while, something from old Doctor Who to watch. I realised as I struggled to select something that I was maybe kind of watched out when it came to the old show. I'd seen it all, over and over again, and was excited that, well, hey, even if new Doctor Who was a disaster, I'd soon have 13 new episodes to repeatedly feast upon until I could get excited about the old series once again. Anyway, I didn't want to choose anything obvious or over-familiar, so eventually I alighted upon the Armageddon Factor. Not a favourite, or a story I had watched that often, so I thought it might have a few surprises. But I'd remembered rather enjoying its grim, warlike setting early on, and the mysterious shadow later, who'd always seemed a bit weird and unreachable, and the fact that Tom Baker is always fun to watch. So I settled down to start my Who-heavy day, to kill the time betwixt dawn and, well, a new one, by picking over that rich 26-year history which would distract me until it was time, and Halfway through episode 2 of The Armageddon Factor, when K9 was on his way to a smelting, I switched it off. God, it was dull. I needed this new series, and I needed it to work. Interestingly, I could now watch pretty much any old series episode again and be thrilled, so this was only a temporary malaise. There's been so much new to digest in the past 20 years that much of what is old, perversely, looks somewhat newer, less familiar. Oldie-woldy, newy-wooey, or even newy-hooey, as no one should ever say ever. Or every-wevery. In the afternoon of the relaunch, my friend John Cooper came round. We'd agreed it would be more fun to watch together, and as he'd never seen the orphaned episodes of The Enemy of the World and The Space Pirates, we watched those. So, yeah, I could handle 25-minute bursts, and watching with someone who'd never seen them before refreshed them with a new perspective. Back then, the idea that among the new episodes of Doctor Who I'd be watching over the next 2 decades would be the other 5 instalments of The Enemy of the World, which at this point were in a cupboard in Nigeria somewhere, would have blown my mind as much as the idea that the Macra would return, that James Bond would play Rassilon, or that the Dravins would be mentioned on primetime British television once again. Oh, and I'd held off, by the way. I'd waited. I'd kept myself chaste for the big day, unspoilt. Unspoilt, but not necessarily unspoiled. I'd read the previews in DWM and SFX, and every tie-in or preview show had been scanned for footage. But I didn't download the bootleg like 2 of my closest Doctor Who fan friends did. Watching the version which still had the old theme on it, leaked by some miscreant, I must track him down and interview him one day, so that people could get an early look. My mate Andy had succumbed, and he gave me some spoiler-free hints. The headline news from which was that whilst it was all good, that Billie Piper was the absolute standout. Yeah, right. We were only going to like her because we want to, not because she'll actually be any good. But no, I held off. I'd waited 16 years, so I was going to see it when everyone else did. Britain united around a cultural cornerstone. And of course, the broadcast version would have the new theme music, which I'd heard played by Chris Moyles on Radio 1 a few days before. Are those strings? Violins? Oh, I love that. And it would be in much better quality than any download scraped from some manky corner of cyberspace, where the nuts come from. Watching it broadcast on BBC One would make it free from artefacts or compromises in quality or any, inexplicable leakages of the voice of a much-loved Irish TV presenter seeping in at a key dramatic moment. Oh my lord, on broadcast, when Graham Norton found his way onto the soundtrack accompanying the terrifying activities in the Hendrix basement, I looked at John as if this was proof that somehow our big moment was going to be ruined. I genuinely thought, for an occurrence like this, many of the viewers would likely switch off, or it would snap them out of their reverie, and the return of Doctor Who would be jeopardised, nay, ruined, by a technical fault. Part of my mind even thought, this is sabotage, it's deliberate. It certainly made the experience I'd been waiting for my entire adult life not perfect. But then, of course, I shouldn't have expected anything less. There's always a trade-off with Doctor Who, isn't there? With something good must come some kind of issue. There's always a giant rat or a scaracen or a magma beast on hand to sully perfection. Fortunately, though, it was a one-off, and the rest of the series went glitch-free. So fortunately, we can now enjoy watching the adventures of the likes of Mickey Smith and Adam and Captain Jack Harkness without any unfortunate distractions. Anyway, March 2006. Let's stay there for a bit. I shouldn't have been surprised because it all seemed to be going so well. I was busy. There wasn't just Doctor Who to tape. I'd brought brand new blank cassettes to capture BBC Three's Doctor Who Confidential too. Oof, the race was on to press stop, eject the tape recording Doctor Who, put in a new tape, then switch channels and then start recording before Doctor Who Confidential kicked in. And I complain about shrunk credits not giving you time to soak in the programme's end these days. But BBC Three, something which had itself only just begun back in February 2003, seemed to be as much a part of the Doctor Who experience as anything else. The show embracing the brave new world of technology, which included a channel predicted by Doctor Who itself back in the Demons. Never mind David Tennant, they should have got Alistair Fergus to do the voiceover. But, it took some effort to see the show and to record it and its relatives. It was still possible to miss it. Even in those times of advanced technology and repeat showings, it wasn't just there at the touch of a button. Unlike now, when even episodes 1, 2, 4, 5 and 6 of The Enemy of the World are, and I've probably watched them as many times as I have the Armageddon Factor. Note to channel controllers, though. If your show on BBC Three is a making-of for the show on BBC One, don't start the former before the latter has finished, otherwise your target audience might get paranoid and angry. Although, to be fair, that's not something they find that difficult. But that aside, what about the episode itself? Was I disappointed with that? Well, hardly. I loved it. I'd been prepared by an article by classic Dr. Sylvester McCoy in The Guardian, I think, to find the incidental music a bit much, and whilst I found the opening number a tad full on, I've always liked my incidental music, even when it fanfares over the word incidental with synthy abandon. So I didn't really mind it, even though that opening track playing over Rose's montage seemed a little naively funky. But by the time Chancellor Flavia was banging out her Gallifreyan lament, I think I knew the soundtrack to this series would end up getting more spins than the Sea Devils concerto that scraped its way through my teenage years. And I even love that montage track now too. It's bouncy and fun. In fact, there's plenty to adore and praise about Rose, but that's for another time and another podcast. See Happy Times and Places, episode 100. I am more interested, in this retrospective, in considering the cause of the half-emptiness of my glass at this time of great celebration. I think there were only a couple of things that were, but it's a shame about the critical version of the fact-checking, I think you'll find. You know the sort of thing. It was the best story ever, but it's a shame they didn't shoehorn this continuity reference in at this point. It's the best story ever, but it's a shame they cast that critically acclaimed stage actor and not that bloke from Stargate what I like. It's the best story ever, but it's a shame I'm such a nerd I can't help finding fault somewhere. My main shame was, I think, the burping bin. It seemed pretty un-Doctor Who-like to me. A bit silly for a show about a police box that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. The anti-plastic, for example, well, that wasn't an issue for me. An expedient ending when the ending wasn't really what the episode was about. When establishing the Doctor, the series, the tone, the characters, the everything, I'll excuse you deusing a test tube Manx leather jacket to wind the action up. But the burping bin, that wasn't a compromise. That was an active choice that seemed to me tonally askew. Didn't like the burping bin. Silly. Shop window dummies coming to life? Fine. Burping bin? No. Silly. And I didn't object to, but I was slightly concerned by the fact that you didn't really see anyone die. The main victim, Clive, now we know he gets toasted. Poor Clive, he was lovely. But we don't see it happen. Oh, I wondered. Rather like you'd not get knife slaying like you do in a lot of older programmes. Are shows which are aimed at least in part at kids these days, are they now not allowed to actually show death? Well, it wouldn't surprise me, I thought. But then I worried. As Clive said, death is the Doctor's one constant companion, so not showing it happen, well, that would definitely be a handicap. It's all very good in waiting for Godot for an important element to remain unseen, but if every time you had someone saying, "Oh God, no," and you had to cut away from the exciting scenes in Doctor Who, well, they'd soon lose their lustre. Fortunately, next week we saw kindly tree woman Jabe burn to death, and the week after a nice young man got his neck broken by the reanimated corpse of his mother, so all was well. Phew. But yeah, much as I loved Rose, there were niggles. I'm a Doctor Who fan. There are always niggles. And there always will be. As I look back over 20 years, I really don't give a monkeys about the burping bin anymore, and there's been nothing quite like it in the show since, so I like to read between the lines with regards to that particular moment, and point out that they didn't really try anything like it again, so much like Wotan calling the title character Doctor Who, we can just consider it a mistake and pretend it never happened. I mean, I say we. I've friends who love it, and Russell T Davies has never been remorseful about it, so I'm very much using the royal we here. Sorry, we are very much using the royal we here. But yes, we consider it a forgivable bit of trial and error. I mean, back in 1963, we never again have the TARDIS take off and render the crew unconscious simply by travelling through time, otherwise the beginning of every story would have got pretty tedious. Likewise, Nestine-created refuse beasts will never again get indigestion from eating a supporting character. I bloody hope not, anyway. Well, I bloody hope not, whilst getting all nostalgic about when they first did it. I'm having my cake and eating it. And pointedly not belching afterwards. Talking of an unearthly child, by the way, when that episode was 20 years old, I was 9, and that Christmas, 1983, I got Doctor Who: A Celebration, a large hardback picture-strewn book marking what we now call Classic Who's 20th anniversary. It was my main Christmas present and paved the way to Damascus, where the Doctor Who fans come from, and probably argue in an annoying and pernickety way. Upon the moment of this new Who 20th anniversary, I am now 51, and a lot of time has passed between the two 20th anniversaries. I'm 42 years older, a magic number, yet still the meaning of life, never mind the universe and everything, eludes me. But I probably measure my life since then with Doctor Who as the unit of said measurement. I know which episodes I missed because of certain people's birthday parties, and forgiven them, have I not? I know when we were on holiday in certain places because we watched this episode here and that episode there. And I know when Grandad died because it made the funeral in the final episode of Remembrance of the Daleks what these days would be called triggering. In those days, it was called thinking, oh, that's a bit sad, and then getting on with it. Anniversaries are important. They let us assess where we are, how much we've gained, and, indeed, how much we've lost. I may have watched Rose in my Manchester family home, but come the Sontaran stratagem, I was in a rented place round the corner watching with my mate Johnny Camden, a symptom of my now single status at the rented place, not Johnny Camden, handsome devil though he is. The Stolen Earth was, on TV, a thrilling union of old friends that was about as exciting as it gets. I watched in London, having started a thrilling union with an old friend that had blossomed into a love affair. No, it wasn't Johnny Camden. I eventually moved there to London and had some very happy times in that happy place. But I remember too, watching Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS there, all too few years later, on what turned out to be my last night, and the temporary cessation of any happy times, no matter what places I found myself in. Compared with what was going on in my life, therefore, Journey to the Centre of the TARDIS wasn't the worst thing that happened that week, which, all things considered, puts things in perspective. When I condense it all down like that, it looks like I was going from one disaster to another, but of course I wasn't. And actually, mostly what I remember when I think of Doctor Who and its miraculous revival are astonishing sights and sounds I wouldn't have believed possible when the sun set after various false dawns, or the BBC issued yet another vague statement, or Doctor Who was needlessly mocked on yet another prime-time show that wasn't fit to lick its boots. The fact is that since March the 26th, 2006, we've all loved and lost, travelled and arrived, stopped and started again. But the Doctor has been our constant companion, changing with the times, buffeting storms, enthralling, entertaining, and sometimes, of course, disappointing us. We wouldn't have it any other way. But Doctor Who encourages us to do our own time travelling. Thinking back is an act of nostalgia. I remember when Rose Tyler was new. But it's mad to think that for any 9-year-old watching the show now, Rose is the equivalent to them of an unearthly child to me back in 1983. An unearthly child from 1963. Those ancient, flickering, monochrome pictures were themselves 20 years old forever ago. Where the dead come from. Yes, young people, your Christopher Eccleston is my William Hartnell. Your Julie Gardner is my Mervyn Pinfield. Your screaming man in a restaurant is my school kid who sounds like Kenneth Williams. I have, you see, been here before, and 20-year-old Doctor Who was a crumbling, black and white relic from which everyone seemed to be dead. Doctor Who, A Celebration, told me that. Hartnell, dead. David Whittaker, dead. Anthony Coburn, dead. Now, Rose, on the other hand, well, that seems like yesterday, and you'd be shocked if you thought anyone involved was no longer in the business, let alone no longer on this earthly plane. And, actually, as an episode, it seems to have fared pretty well in terms of cast and crew still with us, as had An Unearthly Child, really, but through my 9-year-old lens, that seemed unlikely, as in 1963 my mum was young, and she was ancient now, 39. She was 39. But since Rose aired, we've definitely lost some colossal Who icons. Terence Dicks and Barry Letts were at the launch of New Who, but neither lived to mark this moment. Elizabeth Sladen, miraculously, not only appeared in the new iteration of the show, but got her own spin-off at a time when the programme seemed to be the King Midas of the cathode ray. Yeah, I'm sure cathode rays weren't in a telly anymore. I was just trying to find a more interesting way of saying telly. But she, too, has since been taken from us. But the list of the losses since 2006 is a sobering one, comprising a number of classic series regulars. Mary Tamm, Caroline John, Deborah Watling, Jackie Lane, Nicholas Courtney, Richard Franklin, William Russell. And the new series itself hasn't managed to be immune from the angel of death. Ernest Vins, whose cinematography gave the returning show its signature look, died last year, and we've lost designer Michael Pickwoad and Donna's dad, Howard Atfield, and Dorian Maldavar, Simon Fisher-Becker, amongst a host of guest stars too, including the aforementioned Roger Lloyd Pack. Oh, why am I listing the dead again? Well, I think it's because landmark celebrations act as marker points. We survey where we've got to and we acknowledge the people who haven't made it this far. Or, well, you do when you're a middle-aged man anyway. Actually, that's nonsense. I've always been a maudlin old sod, an anorak-clad Grim Reaper, a Henry Arbinger of Doom with a pernickety list, since I read that list of the dead in Doctor Who: A Celebration back in 1983. And now, of course, well, if any of these people pass away, if someone goes who's been within 100 miles of Doctor Who, well, never mind your Shakespeare or even your Corrie. It's Doctor Who star dies. And it's a credit that has miraculously made its way back into the theatre biogs of actors who'd excised it decades ago. It's back, and it's about time. I suppose the melancholy that seeps through as I contemplate this celebration, though, is a healthy one. Much like the bittersweet bonhomie of the post-funereal pub, there's a curious happy sadness about celebration as well as loss. I'm thrilled and amazed we've got this far, and that the show has been more of a success than I could have dreamed. And not only is Christopher Eccleston the Doctor, but so is David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, Jodie Whittaker, and Ncuti Gatwa. And I don't just have 13 new episodes to pore over, should the Armageddon factor still seem like a chore, but actually 188 more, with more to come. And besides the episodes, there are things that have entered the vernacular so organically because of the skill the show has of embedding itself into our lives. Lots of planets have a north, timey-wimey, and, well, ho-ho-ho, marvellous. Of course, everyone jumped onto this ride at different times. I mean, my first exposure to Doctor Who was The Invisible Enemy, so that funny old thing holds a weird place in my canon, which means it will never quite feel the same to me as any other story. But to others, it's just The Invisible Enemy. And I've encountered many people who climbed aboard the TARDIS after Rose. Terrifyingly, many of them were allowed to vote and have beards and jobs and everything. Indeed, a man who came to fix the washing machine the other day clocked the Whophemera dotted around my house and said, "Oh, someone likes Doctor Who. Me too. I love it. I've loved it for years, man." I said, "Oh, yeah? Well, I go right back to the old days too." And he said, "Oh, I remember the kid with the gas mask." For a moment, I felt I looked to him like I had no heartbeat and no life signs of any kind. And now, that show that just won't die. Well, that billboard I saw Eccleston and Piper on, advertising it, I, and that washing machine of mine, live in the house next to it, and opposite where that bus pulled up. So I'm nostalgic about my now home, and that nostalgia dates back to before I even lived here. And I live now with an actress. Not a Shakespearean one, but a Coronation Street one. And actually, I've been in both. I am a Shakespearean and a Coronation Street actor, just not one notable enough to be described as either, or indeed anything at all, in the obituary I won't get. But I don't care. I'm less desperate for affirmation these days, and I certainly don't seek it from beyond the grave. And I'm secure enough in my love for the show that I don't have any need or desire to make my other half watch it with me. Now, if nothing else, that's progress. I don't need other people to have the correct opinion of the show for me to love it. I mean, I judge them slightly, but I don't get angry about it anymore. Why worry about what other people think? Social media has taught us that lots of people think absolute nonsense, and the best thing to do is to ignore them. But of course, a lot of what I've said herein is only pertinent to me. But I think these anniversaries do have a unifying effect on us all. We all have our own stories. Many of my friends and I share the same ones you heard here. Great success after a lifetime in the wilderness. But I also now have friends who weren't even cognizant of the show when Rose burst onto the screen, and yet now they're old enough to drink, to write, to podcast, and probably to mend my washing machine. Timey-wimey, and indeed, cor blimey. And the next episode due after I have recorded this, The Robot Revolution, well, that too will celebrate 20 years one day. Any 31-year-olds watching it now will find that the time betwixt then and now will fly by. You mark my words. And I'll be watching when it goes out, but I won't be breaking out the champagne or the crisps. They're not how I indulge myself anymore. I don't drink, and crisps, or what they contribute to one's middle-aged spread, simply isn't worth it. It'll be a cup of tea and maybe a rice cake or two if I'm really pushing the boat out. And maybe in 20 years' time, 20 years after the robot revolution, the 20th anniversary of the robot revolution, well, the podcasters will be... Oh, God, I didn't even know that word either 20 years ago. Podcasters. So no, in 20 years' time, not podcasters. There probably won't be podcasters. Podcasters will be 20 years ago. Just as Rose was at the forefront of the brave new world of an extra channel or two, amazing, I'm watching BBC Three, and exclusive content that could be accessed via the red button. Episodes could be poured over before and after on forums. Well, and today the show is there streaming away on a platform undreamed of in 2005 and discussed in podcasts and on social media, which have swept away the old ways of doing things largely. Well, in 20 years' time, it will all be there on some other thing we can't even dream of, and discussed in some other way we haven't conceived, because the way we digest our entertainment and the way that we communicate changes in manners not even science fiction writers can imagine. But I can guarantee that Doctor Who will be at the forefront of whatever it is, causing arguments, stirring up excitement, creating conversation. Me? I'll be 71, which sounds apocalyptic. And in that time, well, let's hope for no more divorces or house moves, please? I've had enough of them. But I know there will be people I love whom I will lose, and there will be ups and downs, and there will be joys and disappointment, and they'll likely be navigated with the marker buoys that are episodes of Doctor Who. The show will sometimes comfort, sometimes distract me, but it will always be there in the background, through the oncoming storm. Now, there's another phrase I didn't know 20 years ago. So as we look forward, and it looks like it all comes with Anita Dobson flooding back, whatever triumphs and disasters happen in the next series and beyond of Doctor Who, both to us and to our favourite show, well, it seems to me it's impossible to imagine it not playing an integral part in everything we do. Because this Doctor Who thing, it really is the trip of a lifetime. Thank you for listening to Indefinable Magic. It's back, which was written and performed by me, Toby Haydoke. You can get these podcasts early by supporting me on patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. And you can also go to kofi.com/Toby Haydoke. Your support is appreciated. The podcast artwork is by Dylan Patterson, and the music for Indefinable Magic was specially composed by Dominic Glynn. I'm grateful to the people who make these podcasts possible by supporting me on patreon.com/Toby Haydoke. They include Mark Wright, Alan W. Wright, David Workman, Lee Wood, Stephen Witowski, Mr. Withit, Chris Williams, David James Wilson, Rich Wiggins, Kevin West, Stephen Waters, Peter Ware, Gavin Ware, Craig Wallace, Alistair Wallace, Steve Walker, Jeff Walker, Gary Wales, Lee Wakerley, John Turner, Fanman Sang, Jim Trinowden, Sidney Truitt, David Trainier, Sabrina Tirabassi, Jason Thompson, Richard Thomas, Dr. Gary Thomas, Matthew Tate, Mark Swan, Adam Stones, Chris Stokes, David Spofford, Joey Stephen, Matthew Speddings, David Spencer, the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Tauren Woodbeasts, Andrew Snedden, Richard Smith, Trevor Smith, Giles Smith, David Smith, Dale Smith, there's a lot of Smiths, Darcy Smart, Gavin Skinner, James Silk, Scott Sherritt, John Sheehan, Jack Sharp, Christopher Sharp, Nigel Sharp, Frank Shales, Samuel, Edward Salt, Nick Salmond, Tom Selinsky, Mark Sandham, and Paul Sharma. If you would like your name read out, well, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Haydoke, where for as little as £3 a month, you get your name read out sometimes, and you also get advance releases of these podcasts. You get exclusive behind-the-scenes looks at the making of various DVD and Blu-ray projects I have. You get your own special podcast, your own monthly AMA, and all sorts of other interactive goodies. You can also support these at kofi.com/Toby Haydoke, and you could do something that involves no financial support at all, but is still appreciated, because I mostly, to be honest, appreciate you just listening. But if you enjoy listening, please go to Apple, to iTunes, to all the places where you can digest these and give them a like, a subscribe, 5 stars, and a few lines of positive comment. You can also like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Toby Haydoke, where these appear as audio-only broadcasts with a placeholder image. But it's another way of listening, and you have to be everywhere these days, and I fear I might be. And amongst the everywhere as I am, on all the social media, I'm on X, still a nobody, at Toby Haydoke. I also have a stream for just these podcasts called at Haydoke Podcasts. I'm also on Blue Sky. Mr. Blue Sky's handle for me is my name. It's got all the other business that goes with it, but I'm me. You'll find me. And I'm also on Instagram at toby.haydoke, and I have a Facebook page as well. So you can literally get sick of me if you so desire. Well, happy 20th birthday, everybody. There were so many different tangents I could have got on then, but I'm sure there are other podcasts for that. But it's been really interesting looking back, and I hope you have been as nostalgic as I have. And there's a lot of looking back, isn't there? There's a lot of looking back, which, yeah, it's a funny experience. Pieces of my past falling away like melting icebergs or whatever. Oh, I'm off to the Eye of Orion.